congratulations for winning the Ramnath Goenka Award for Non-Fiction. Neerja Chowdhury needs no introduction. It's not for nothing that her book, How Prime Ministers Decide, has become quite a rage among readers. For a book of non-fiction to generate so much interest and interviews, it had to be something special. I would think it's not merely a document of contemporary India with fascinating hints of how New Delhi as a power center functioned over the decades. It will also be a document of how journalism was done in a certain period of time. I have had the privilege of working with Neerja Chowdhury, of seeing her in a newsroom and in the field during elections. I have seen Neerja carrying her thick notebook, meticulously taking notes as we went about covering crucial assembly elections. So I was not at all surprised to read the fine details and nuances that come up in the book. In the past few decades, if I'm right, there is not an election that Neerja has not covered, at least in the northern half of India. There would be a few politicians worth their salt who would not know her, and vice versa. What I found remarkable about her is that she never found it difficult to connect with the young. She was never stingy about sharing her findings, nor impatient when hearing them out. Journalists, they say, have to ask questions. What they often forget to mention is they also have to listen. Be open to feedback and inputs from all directions. And of course, read the air, so to speak, read between the lines and the outlines in the air itself. Neerja is that quintessential journalist, someone every new recruit can probably study and learn from. Speaking of election, as I was speaking to you 2 days ago, you were just back from Maharashtra. What is your assessment? Which way is it going?
Thank you, Shantwana, for those words. I'm going to request people that are all scattered so far away, and if you don't mind, can I stand?
Yeah, please.
So I can
Maybe we can announce people to come back.
Can I request people to come up front, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Then one can see you a little more. Thank you. आगे भी हैं यहाँ.
We would request everyone to join us for this session between Neerja Chowdhury and editor Santhana Bhattacharya.
Thank you. So I just came back 2 days ago from Maharashtra. Shantwana, you are absolutely right. You know, they give a tagline under my column in the Indian Express, which is called the Neerja Chowdhury column, a weekly column, that I've covered 10 Lok Sabha elections. Now with the 2024 election, it is 11. And of course, many state elections. And I must tell you, and my family will bear me out, I just love hitting the road at election time. मुझे बहुत मज़ा आता है. My son says, chill out, Ma. Why are you working so hard? For me, this is chill out. Because I find India is such a diverse country, such a plural country, and you find new things every time you go into the field. People, how they think, how they act, the different turn of phrase, like in Maharashtra. Of course, you know, religion, race, local idols, and every time you discover something very new about the country. And it's a very thrilling experience. What a diverse country we have, the like of which does not exist in the world. And here we hold together as a democracy, faulty democracy with all its shortcomings, but we hold together. So I find it a very energizing experience every single time. Now in Maharashtra, when I went there, one of the, you know, people, observers who's watched the scene, मैंने कहा क्या हो रहा है? उसने कहा कट टू कट है यहाँ, कट टू कट है. मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा कट टू कट. We will say it's a very close election, but cut to cut. And it is really cut to cut. When the Lok Sabha election took place, the opposition, Maha Vikas Aghadi, was ahead. It won 30 out of 48 Lok Sabha seats. And that advantage people thought it would retain over Mahayuti, or the ruling group. We know that Mahayuti is BJP, Eknath Shinde's breakaway Shiv Sena, and Ajit Pawar's breakaway NCP, whereas on the other side is the Congress, Sharad Pawar's NCP, and Uddhav Thackeray's Shiv Sena. And of course, there are smaller parties aligned to both the groups. 4 with the BJP side, 2 with the Uddhav Thackeray Congress side. And then there are 5, 6 major parties like MNS, BSP, Chandrasekhar Azad's party, Owaisi's AIMIM, and so on. And when you look at the scene, and of course there are scores and scores of independents and rebels. The Congress has gotten suspended, about 16 of them very recently. So it is a maha confusion at the moment. Kisne kisko kahan khada kiya hai, kisko kaatne ke liye. So that being the case, overall, the Mahayuti is catching up very fast. It's done course correction, and the reason, you know, you have caste access on the MVS side, which is the old winning axis of Maratha, Muslim, and Dalit, and sympathy for Sharad Pawar and Uddhav Thackeray, because their parties were split, and also an element of under the surface sub-nationalism which is playing out, which is Gujarati versus Marathi. That the industries are being taken to Gujarat at the cost of Maharashtra, and a lot of people feel a sense of angst. So this is on the MVA side. On the Mahayuti side is social welfareism, and chief amongst those issues is a very important issue which has traction is Mukhyamantri Majha Ladki Bahan Yojana, which has given 1,500 rupees in the hands of women between the ages of 18 and 60. And I went to the villages and I found these women, Dalit women, Maratha women, OBC women, very excited. हमारे हाथ में पैसा आया है, हमको दिया है हमारे भाई ने, एकनाथ शिंदे ने, आगे भी वो हमारे लिए कुछ करने वाले हैं. And they tell you, they've all got 7,500 rupees in their hand. In fact, I didn't meet one single woman, Shantwana, who had not received it. And ये हमने किया, मैंने सब्जी बेचने की कार्ट खरीद ली है, मैं अब सब्जी बेचती हूँ, मैं सूरत से साड़ियाँ मंगवाती हूँ, उनको बेचती हूँ. You know, income augmenting schemes that they are into. Of course, it has made life easier for them in the household, even though there are the educated women who will tell you this will not offset inflation. With the rising prices going, is this going to continue? Does the state have the finances to make it viable? वो सवाल भी उठ रहे हैं. लेकिन the poorer women are very happy with it. So on the ruling side, you have the social welfare schemes, you have Hindutva with Yogi Adityanath talking about batenge to katenge, and the Prime Minister saying saath hai to safe hai. So there is this religious Hindutva, as well as welfareism on the ruling side. So where jahan pani aake baithega, we don't know, but it's a very close election, what is called a takkar election at the moment.
So it was a game changer in Madhya Pradesh for BJP. Let's see what happens in Maharashtra. Coming back to the book, in political journalism, we are usually hardwired to look at decision making with a critical, analytical lens. What deficit on the ground brought about such and such policy? How effective will it be? What can be its side effects? It's done almost at a mechanistic level, as if socio-political realities are things and the policy decisions are tools that act on them. However, in your book, you have chosen to humanize the process of decision-making by reading it through the human frailties and the background stories. Is it how you felt about the processes all through your career? Is it built into primary observations itself? Or does this curiosity only emerge when you look beyond the headlines?
That was a very difficult question, Shantwana. I must tell you that, when I wrote this book, my publishers and editor was here, of Aleph. I kept saying to them, I want this book not to be beautiful prose. I want this book, because it's about politics, to reflect the drama, the daily drama, the nautanki that Indian politics is today. And the suspense, the machinations, the backstabbing, the intrigue, the pulls, the pressures, and the pressure on the Prime Minister to retain power, to wrest power, that is a very primary motivation. I wanted, in the way it was written, that was my effort, I don't know whether I've succeeded, to reflect that. Now, the human side, what you talk about, is my learning from this whole experience. As I went into it, the first time when I thought of doing a book was in 1999. And the thought came to me when I heard a story in Mr. M.L. Fotedar's, it wasn't his office, it's one of his aides. M.L. Fotedar was political aide to Indira Gandhi, and of course, subsequently, he became minister also in Narasimha Rao's cabinet. And somebody who worked with him closely used to belong to the Mohan Meakin company at one time, Anil Bali. And so he was, at that time considered one of the sidees. But unko bahut information rehti thi. So one day, we were just having a chat. I would see him from time to time. And he told me a story which really, stunned me. And it was about Indira Gandhi. And he said, when Indira Gandhi, she took to religion when she was out of power in a big way and visited every major temple in the country between 1977 and 1988. In 1980, when she came back to power. And one of the reasons was her fear that the Janata government might harm Sanjay Gandhi, so she was afraid for him. But another reason was also, I suppose, she was out of power and in the wilderness. And thirdly, probably she also at some moments used it politically. तो उन्होंने कहा वो मंदिर जाती थी Paramacharya, every major mandir you can think of, she either patronized or went and worshipped there when she was out of power. When she came back to power, 1980, तो ये अनिल बाली जो उनके घर में आना जाना रहता था काफ़ी, बिकॉज फोतेदार के साथ थे वो, और मोहन मीकिन के मैनेजर थे इन मोहन नगर. He said to her, after she had come back from the swearing in, Madam, आपको चामुंडा जाना चाहिए. Chamunda was a temple where she would send 101 rupiah every month, and the prasad would come to her from there. Of course, she had a temple in her home also, which is still there in the Indira Gandhi Museum. You can see it. So she said, yes, because she really believed in Chamunda. It's in Himachal Pradesh. And so she said, मैं जाऊंगी, but 3-4 महीने के बाद जाऊंगी. So 3-4 months later, she sent word. Her secretary sent word to Bali, and Kapil Mohan, जो कि मोहन मिकिन को head करते थे उस समय, that you go and make arrangements. So it was arranged that she would go there on 22nd of June, 1980. So they all were there. The Ramlal, the chief minister, was there with his entire entourage. And suddenly, when they are there, word comes that she is going to give Chamunda a skip. She is going directly back from Jammu to Delhi. So the Pandit in the temple was very furious. He said, अगर आम आदमी औरत नहीं आते तो माँ उनको माफ कर देती है, लेकिन अगर शासक नहीं आता है, then Ma will never forgive the shasak, the ruler. So anyway, they pacified him and they did the puja themselves, and they were heading back to Delhi. And 50 kilometers down the road, they get the news that Sanjay Gandhi's plane had crashed. So they rushed back to Delhi. They reached there at about 2:30 in the morning, went straight to her house. Mrs. Gandhi was sitting by the body of Sanjay. And Sanjay had acquired a new plane and had been doing dangerous acrobatics and had lost control that day. And the plane had crashed not very far from the Prime Minister's house. So she saw them, and she immediately got up and came to them and asked, do you think is this because I did not go to Chamunda? So then they quietened her down and said, this is not the moment to talk about it. So on the Chautha day, when Anil Bali was there and went, she was standing with Sunil Dutt, and she came across immediately and again asked this question, do you think it is because I did not go to Chamunda? Now she went there 5 months later in December, and when she went there, that was the same Pandit who had been very angry earlier, and that Pandit's hands shook as he performed the prayers, because Mrs. Gandhi did every mudra to perfection. And she wept and wept and wept. And then the Pandit tried to comfort her. आप आगे से रोना नहीं, आपके इतने बेटे बेटियां हैं देश में, उनकी देखभाल करनी है आपको. And then she went out and she planted trees. This was one of Sanjay Gandhi's 5-point programs. And she came back to Delhi that evening, and she had a National Herald function, and she invited to the stage Rajiv Gandhi, who was not known at that point much, and she introduced him to the audience. So the politically sharp made a mental note of it, and that was the beginning of Rajiv emerging as her successor. So when I heard this story, it was a different side of this, powerful prime minister who ruled the country with an iron hand all through the emergency, from 75 to 77. And in 77, in a most unexpected way, she called for elections and lifted the emergency. There was no reason for her to do that. Things were under control. It's not that there were sanctions against the country. And suddenly, out of the blue, that also is something I've looked at. Why did she go in for elections at that time and was routed? So the human side that you talk about of every prime minister, we think they are so powerful they can do anything. But that is not the way things are, because their decision-making is circumscribed by so many different factors. And this this vulnerabilities, the superstition, I wanted to capture that in the political story also.
You know, I'm reminded of a story I heard. I was still young. Hiranmay Kalika's mother, Kalyani Kalnikar, was Indira Gandhi's friend. They were in Shantiniketan together when they were young for a few years. And after Sanjay Gandhi's death, you know, she was called here. And there was a particular Tagore song that she wanted to hear from her, which is called Ache Dukkho Ache Mrittu. Ache Dukkho Ache Mrittu, Tobu Anando Jage, Tobu Ananto Tobu Anando Jage. There is death, there is sadness, there is death, but there is still joy in the great creation of God. So that is the song which she sung, and it seems Indira Gandhi started singing with her and then broke down. This is a story I have heard as a child in my early teens. So, prime ministers, of course, and when I was reading this book, I remembered this story suddenly. You have certainly humanized the prime minister, and it's not just about Indira Gandhi. Your anecdote about Narasimha Rao, Chandrasekhar, VP Singh, they're all absolutely fascinating. And what is more fascinating is you have actually drawn the connection of those particular incidents. And strange incidents are superstitious occurrences to a decision making, how it may have influenced a prime minister's view, perspective, and decision-making process. If you can share one of those stories.
Okay, I'll be quick about it. I must just say, for those of you who have not read the book is about 6 prime ministers and about 6 decisions. It's not about the lives of prime ministers. I have looked at 6 major decisions they made which had an impact beyond their time. Like Indira Gandhi, I've looked at why did she go for elections, how did she bounce back to power in 2.5 years, something that had not happened to any world leader in recent times. Then I've looked at Rajiv Gandhi. How did he respond to the Shah Banu judgment, which was, maintenance of 179 rupees being given to an old Muslim woman who had been divorced. And the whole country was up in arms. The Muslims were up in arms, the Hindus were up in arms, and it laid the foundations for politics that followed for 30 years after that, and to the rise and rise and rise of the BJP. Then I look at Vishwanath Pratap Singh. Why did he go in for Mandal decision to give 27% reservation to the OBCs in jobs, in government jobs? And also I look at Narasimha Rao, his non-decision allowing the Babri Masjid to be brought down. Was he complicit in this decision? Did he allow it to happen? I look at that whole chronology, and I'll come to this, anecdote that you're talking about. And then Atal Bihari Vajpayee, how did he go in for the nuclear test during his term, for which Mr. Narasimha Rao had prepared the ground? And finally, Manmohan Singh, and why and how did he go in for the Indo-US nuclear deal, which led to the strategic relationship between the US and India. And it was the one time that Dr. Manmohan Singh asserted. Otherwise, he was considered as not a strong prime minister, and Mrs. Sonia Gandhi was seen as half prime minister during his term. So coming to what you're referring to, Shantwana, which is, again, Narasimha Rao, who used to go to this is a strange thing with virtually all the prime ministers, maybe not VP Singh overtly, that they believed in gurus. So here was this Shivanand Murthy, who used to be an IPS officer. And at the age of 25, he turned to spiritualism and he built an ashram in Vishakhapatnam. And Narasimha Rao, who spoke in multiple languages, Hindu philosophy, Hindu thought he was interested in, very erudite, well-read, learned prime minister. He used to go to Shivanand Murthy's ashram as prime minister. He would address him as Guruji. And one day during a conversation, he asked Shivanand Murthy, what do you think is going to happen to the Babri Masjid? So Shivanand Murthy closed his eyes, opened them a few moments later, and said, I don't see it there. Now, how much did this affect Narasimha Rao? We don't know. People say, this is told to me by a very senior official who was close to Shivanand Murthy and to Narasimha Rao and worked long years in Andhra Pradesh. But, I start the book by saying that top is a lonely place. It's lonely for the head of any company, but it's very lonely for the prime minister of a country, and particularly a country like India, where we look at the government and the prime ministers as my baap, sarkar, my baap hai. So, and several of the prime ministers told me this, that how lonely it is and how awesome is the thought that you are going to be making a decision which is going to affect millions of people across generations. And that can be very, it can be very awesome thought to live with. Apart from the fact that the Prime Minister does not have time for himself or herself. Like VP Singh said, I can't go and visit a family, I can't go and play golf, I can't go for a holiday, my time is not my own. And I say this, the two people who made a virtue of this loneliness were Indira Gandhi, who used to, when people came to see her, she would be doodling on the pad in front of her. She wanted to get a measure of them without letting them get a measure of her. And of course, Narendra Modi, whose PR team has made much of this lonely image. Wherever you see him in a photograph that the government or the party projects, it is Narendra Modi alone. You see him come down Air India One all alone. You never see an official or a cabinet colleague behind him. If he's standing before Sardar Patel's statue, it is alone. If he's traveling in a train in Japan or South Africa, the shot is of him alone. And the purpose is to give the message, I am there for you. Main hoon na. So that is his politics. So also was with Indira Gandhi. With the other prime ministers, yes, they lived with this feeling of, having to take decisions and the buck stopping with them. So anyway, I've dwelt a lot on, even VP Singh, who was, till today, he's seen as the villain by many sections of our society because of the reservations he gave to the OBCs, which led to a lot of violence at that time. But in 1999, 2003, when he used to undergo dialysis and I would go and see him in Apollo Hospital, he was looking at the future and assessing did what I do was right. Like he said, all my life I've scribbled, now I need an eraser. And he would look at, when he said, this poetry he was writing, these lantern-lit boats, when he was in the Bombay Raj Bhavan, watching these boats at night, littered on the sea, where will they take me? And so those kind of things, Of course, he said, prime ministers run government, I ran history. And one of the reasons why I've included VP Singh in the book, even though he did not complete his whole term, is because he changed India forever. And that affirmation action by him and the rise of the OBCs and the awakening in them is a story that's ongoing and is influencing our politics, whether it's in Maharashtra, whether it was in UP or nationally.
Since you mentioned Narendra Modi, you have left out Narendra Modi and Jawaharlal Nehru, the only two prime ministers who entered third term. There are also two figures who have sought to give the nation an identity that is also mixed up with their own image and idea of India. Is the omission because of reasons of lack of direct access, open collaborative sources, or because they deserve separate books?
Or because?
They deserve separate books.
Separate books. Okay. No, I'm asked this question often, why have I left out Narendra Modi? When I was finishing the book, it was the end of his second term. That itself was 9 to 10 years. And I have put in my epilogue that he's too important to be ignored, because he's brought about a shift in Indian politics. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but certainly it's a paradigm shift that's taken place. It's not only about fulfilling the core agenda of the RSS and the BJP. He has a civilizational project. He's talked about a 1,000-year civilizational project. Will we see how much of it we will see pan out now in his third term? So all that is there. Karan Singh told me he should not be compared to Indira Gandhi. He should be compared to Jawaharlal Nehru. He said, I suspect he would like to be like Nehru and surpass Nehru. So his term certainly needs to be put under the scanner. And I left it out, even though I did the first draft. I did some work on this. But I felt that it would not do justice to him or his term or his politics, because as the incumbent Prime Minister, there were very few people willing to talk honestly about what was really going on. I had hard information, inside information about the other prime ministers. That was given to me by a whole lot of people, but only after that prime minister demitted office, not while that prime minister was in office. So the problem of getting to hard information, real information, while the prime minister is in office was a real one. And a friend of mine said to me, Neerja, ये तुम्हारा सबसे हल्का चैप्टर होगा और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट होगा क्योंकि मीडिया इसी को पिकअप करेगी. So, and many people talked to me, but they were not willing to be quoted. My book has mostly, there'll be very few attributions to sources, but on the whole, people have come on record to say, I said this and I saw this, so I have quoted that. Apart from secondary sources and all that, newspaper articles, books, etc., that I've referred to. So I felt I also did not have the benefit of hindsight. It was a work in progress. So I decided it would have to be left for the future.
Of the prime ministers, that the 6 of them that you have written about, you have not only shown them as lonely and vulnerable, often superstitious. There is also that fact that decision-making is not always done through the processes in the power corridor, but under influence of small players. So who do you think among these 6 was most influenced by these kind of small players, or peripheral influences, as we call it?
You know, every prime minister has its coterie. And, you know, most prime ministers rely not just on their cabinet colleagues. In fact, The cabinet colleagues often know less than these so-called small players. The small players who may be in the Prime Minister's house or office, who will have access to the Prime Minister several hours in a day, will see the Prime Minister in action. They will even watch the changing expressions of the Prime Minister. So these so-called small players, Santwana, were very important for me as sources. As a journalist who's written about politics now for 40 years, this is something I learned very early on, that nobody is small. In fact, so-called, hangers-on and aides and industry people, fixers. That's a very interesting story, how the fixers operate in the corridors of power in Delhi and the state capitals. A very fascinating story. They are the real sources of information that you should not ignore. And so if you look at which prime minister had relied more than others on these small players, I think all of them relied heavily on these small players. Like, say, Anil Bali or Mohan Meekins. Now, today you will have the Adani, Ambani. At that time, there was a Mohan Meekin in Indira Gandhi's time, who were very, very